Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I think it was Katie Yip, is it? Who reached out to YY. I don't know if you know YY as well, who's on Job Street now. And then YY reached out to me to just give a little bit of sharing today. The topic on hand, which is the workplace trends to look out for in 2024 and beyond. And also, I think to touch on a little bit on the marketplace, how jobs are evolving and what are the top 10 in-demand jobs. And I'll give a little bit of color into the salary trends and things like that as well. Most of this is coming out of our own Job Street database and research. So this will be things like our Job Street annual salary report, and also like other thought leadership material that we have, on future recruitment, marketplace trends and things like that. So some of the data here is general in nature, but some of it is also specific to Job Street and the jobs that are advertised there. So maybe there might be demand for some other types of jobs which may not be listed in Job Street. So there might be very strong demand for laborers, say for example, or construction staff, workers, things like that. Like the construction industry is pretty strong at the moment, but maybe those jobs are not advertised in Job Street, so the data may not show that per se, right? So just a little bit of caveat into those sort of things. So I will run through the session. It will be about 20 to 30 minutes, I hope. I kind of pulled these slides together last minute and I didn't have a chance to do a run through, so I will just play by ear. If I'm going too long, just give me a signal and pull me down. Okay, so I'll just touch a little bit about myself and my background. Then I'll jump right into the workplace trends, and then I'll talk about the marketplace updates and the top 10 jobs, and then what does that mean for you? I'll do a little bit of a plug for Job Street as well in there. And I'll try not to be too obvious about it. And then after that we can just have some Q&A and just see what you guys have in mind. If it's stuff that's on the slides, sure. If it's stuff that's outside, anything else. The topic is really wide, so I've tried to bring in stuff for both, for those of you who might be business people who are looking at hiring, as well as those of you who are looking for jobs as well, right? So I try and cover both sides, but I will skew more towards on the side of recruitment because that's where I come from. Okay, but if you want to talk about other aspects of it and trends, feel free. If you want, you can ask questions during the session. We don't have to wait right until the end to do Q&A, so I'm perfectly happy to take any questions at any point. Okay, that's my glamour picture. Okay, and this is as good as the slides get today. After that, it's very boilerplate. So, as mentioned, I'm currently the operations director at Job Street. I look after basically everything which is outside of sales, right? So once a sales agent has spoken to you and sold you a package for you to place an ad. So just in case anyone is not aware, Job Street is a job portal. So we essentially place ads for jobs, right? So we have jobs in all sorts of areas, and the price of those job ads vary. There's some job roles which are free, that you can post for free, but others are also paid. And we also have a little bit of dynamic pricing, so that goes on the demand and supply in space, right? So, okay, so I look after basically everything out of sales, so that includes customer service. So once you place an ad, monitoring that ad performance, making sure that you get enough applications. If it needs to be boosted, what do we do? If you're not getting enough applications, how can we help you? We tell you how you can rewrite your ad so that it's more appealing to candidates. Is it missing any information? Sometimes people like to post ads and not mention the company or not mention the salary involved. They think oh, okay, only once people contact me, then I'll tell them the salary, I'll share the salary. But chances are a lot of people won't even contact you in the first place if they don't see a salary there, right? So some of these things we will educate. We'll also tell you how to word things better so that it appeals better with the younger generation or the target group that you're going for, right? So then once you place the ad, make sure that it's running right, get enough applications, Any sort of issues we will handle on customer service. I also look after the business intelligence team, which helps to churn out some of this data here, which is used in our reports. So I look after all those items, right? And as mentioned before, I had my own startup, which I ran for about almost 10 years, which we had to shut down during the pandemic, essentially because there was no bus travel for about 2 years, right? No interstate travel, which is what we specialized in. So when things reopened, I had to decide, was I going to restart the business and start from scratch again? Like before before the pandemic, we had about 85 staff, and by the end of the pandemic, we had 5 staff working part-time, right? We actually had to let go quite a lot of people along the way. It was quite a painful process, and it's like, okay, do I want to build that all up again? And since I felt that, it was sort of stagnating in my growth professionally there, I thought, okay, let's try something new, and JobStreet came across my plate. Right. Just in terms of background, I have a master's in management and undergraduate in information systems. But I think nowadays, in a lot of cases, employers aren't really too concerned about the degree that you have. It's more about the skill set, how you apply yourself to problems. Those are the sort of things that people tend to focus on in interviews. Your qualifications is just sort of a gatekeeper. Yes?
I do have a question in regards to qualification. Certain companies that still emphasize a bachelor degree
until they reject certain candidates with diploma. So what do you think about this scenario?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, that still is the case in many bigger companies, multinationals and such, and also GLCs. They will have a pre-qualification of degree level that they want, or even particular areas, so a degree in information science, or a degree in whatever it might be, right? Graphic design, something like that. But you will find a lot of smaller companies, SMEs, startups especially, now moving away from that. You could have a bachelor's in philosophy, and go in as a data analyst now, right? So it's actually quite interesting, that's the space, and I think it will start off in these spaces and eventually move towards these bigger companies. It's just because it's so institutionalized in these organizations. HR is done a certain way, talent acquisition is done in a certain way. It's hard to rock that boat. But when it comes to startups, they are always a bit more interested in what's different, what do you bring in to the mix, what can I train you in, because actually you're not going to be doing one thing when you come in here, you're going to be doing 5 different things, right? So, so they just go more on the can-do attitude, your learning curve, things like that, right? And how you apply yourself. Did you, although you have a bachelor's in philosophy, but have you done any other side certifications that shows your interest in this area? That will probably take you further than a person who has a degree in information science and just regurgitates what's in the textbook, because as we know, a lot of the stuff that we learn in uni is not really practical in real life, right? So, I mean, in my courses, I don't think I've applied anything, which I learned in my degree, especially my undergraduate degree now. But it did teach me, programming did teach me things like logical thinking, structuring. So a lot of the ways that I break down my work is the same way you would break down a problem to write a program. So, yeah. So I think those are the sort of skills that you pick up from your degree and from your learnings.
Thank you for answering.
Okay, so let's jump into the workplace trends. So I've broken it up into 2 sides. One is on the candidate side, and the other one's on the hirers or company side. So these are some of the trends that we find, which I thought might be interesting to highlight here. So I think one thing that's quite interesting, first up, is job hopping. I think a lot of people here will say that, young people these days, you see their CV, you don't want to look at them as a candidate. You see 1 year here, 1 year here, 1 year here, 1 year here. They're just jumping. Unfortunately, that is the reality. Young people are interested in trying new things. So as we found through our Seek Asia database, on average, people who are between the ages of 18 and 22 hold a job on average for 9.3 months. So changing a job every year, or less than a year, is quite shocking, right? But luckily, as time goes by, that number does increase. So from you just add in another 3 years, and it almost doubles in lifespan, right, in a company, and that tends to grow. So there's a lot of opportunities. People tend to take whatever comes in first, and they jump, right? The other sad reality is, especially in Malaysia, entry-level jobs are very lowly paid, right? If you come in as a fresh graduate, you are going to be getting like minimum wage or almost minimum wage. Like when I started working 20 years ago, my salary was like 2005, right? As a fresh grad, it's still 2005 now, right? If you're lucky, right? Some will give you even like 2000 or 23, you know? You really have to go to like big consulting firms, MNCs, GLCs, you know, that range to be getting 3,000, 3,005 as your starting salary. And hires, even though you take you at 2,000, like within 1 year, they're not going to increase it to 3,000, right? Like Malaysian hires are like very, by the book, it's like, okay, you know, 5% to 8% increment, you know? And so you will never get a 30% jump as a fresh graduate unless you jump jobs. So, you know, to get from 1,005, 1,006 to 3,000, you are going to have to jump 3 times to get there, right? And you want to get to like a 3,000 at least before the age of 25, which is why you will see a lot of people move in that first time, right? But yeah, if you are an employer and you have good talents, you know, I would really advise, you know, for fresh graduates and things like that, 30% increments in your first year, give it to them, you know, it's 300 ringgit, you know, something like that. It's really sad. The other thing I think a lot of people know is flexible working arrangements. This is like a really big thing ever since the pandemic and even before that. And you'll find that the different generations ask for different things, right? So if you look at your Gen Z and millennials, so just by definition, let me just run through the definition. So like a baby boomer is someone who is born between 1965, I think, to 1945 to 1965, right? And millennials are between 1965 to 1980, right? Gen X. Yes. Then millennials are 1981 to 1994. Gen Z is 95 to 2012. And after 2012 is Gen Alpha. But yeah, those guys are like 12 years old. Hopefully they're not working yet. So yeah, so for the Gen X and baby boomers, they talk a lot about work-life balance. They want a separation of work and life. And they want to take things like, they're in the stage of their lives now where they want to take sabbaticals. They're like, you want to have a bit of a rest, you want to take 6 months off, 3 months off, a career break. These are the kinds of things that they're looking for from their hirers or their employers to, you know, say like, hey, I need a little bit of rest, but I also want the security of coming back to my job, right? They don't want to just leave their jobs and say, hey, I'm going to look for a job when I start back again once I've recharged and found my purpose and done my Eat, Pray, Love session, right? And they also want hybrid working, right? So maybe like 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, or 1 day at home, 3 days in the office, 4 days in the office. But they do like going into the office a little bit, just to connect with their colleagues, right? That bond which you've built over the years, you know, going for lunch, all these things, you know, is quite strong. But when you look at the millennials and the Gen Zs, right? They are perfectly happy, like 100% remote. They're like, why do I need to come into the office? You know, why do I need to do this? You know, from the office we can Zoom, we can talk. Like, what is the purpose of my ass being in the office? Right? What is it? You know, so they are really good with remote, They don't need to connect with, go for lunch with each other and everything, because they already have all their social networks and circles. They have their WhatsApp groups, their TikTok groups, their whatever. They're connected on a lot of different levels, and that one-to-one go for lunch thing is not major priority. Because they're starting off also at like lower, pay and everything like that. They may not have their own cars. Getting into office, getting into work is really a pain, right? So they would really prefer it, minimum hybrid, best is remote, quite often, right? Flexible working arrangements, things like work from anywhere, like to work out of a cafe. I don't have to be anywhere in there. Perks like unlimited leave, right? So actually quite a lot of companies actually do have this nowadays. It's called unlimited leave, and technically means that you can go on holiday as much as you want, but also like you can work from anywhere and things like that. So you sort of work in the ethics of how you take it into the orientation and the culture, so that people don't abuse it. Of course, if you do abuse it, then there's ways to say like, hey, you're falling behind on your deliverables, people are depending on you. And so there's a softer touch to managing that and making sure that people don't, just say, hey, 300 days I'm going to go on leave, right? So just using it responsibly. But they like that flexibility is there, that I don't have to apply for leave and get permission to go, right? What else? Oh yeah, and instead of work-life balance, they're more interested in work-life integration. So I can do the stuff, I can go to gym in the morning, from 8 to 10, and then still do work and like receive, messages on my phone, If I tell you that one of the perks is you get a workstation, like you'll get a rejection from the application. They're like, it's not a laptop, why would I want a desktop, right? It's so weird. It's so weird to tell your friends that you have a desktop computer at work. Right? So it's like a laptop that I can go and, I can coordinate with my friends. We can go and work out of a cafe today. I can go and do this. And then I don't mind working outside of work hours as long as they're able to do the things that I want as well. So they are looking for integration rather than a clear balance and separation. So give them that power to flex, right? Naturally, gig jobs and freelancing is on the rise. Almost 25% of our working population now in Malaysia is in the gig economy or freelancing. This is also partly because of our low graduate salaries and things like that, right? If you work as a Grab driver or Grab rider, you can easily be earning 3,000, 4,000 if you work hard, versus getting 2,000 and having to, commute into office, right? So, because it's so much easier to get money this way, a lot of people start off on this path already, or while they're waiting for a job, they started and they're like, oh, actually, it's going to be a step down for me financially to actually go into this. But then you will find that, your ceiling is also there. So then they get trapped in that level. But it is definitely an ongoing process that we will have this, and I think, the gig economy and freelance economy is going to be easily 30 to 40% of our workforce. So we really need to look at how we integrate that and balance that with our full-time staff as well. And also how do we protect these people, make sure that they have enough for their retirement and things like that. Gig workers don't have, medical insurance, they don't have EPF, SOXO, all these things built in. So you don't have that automatic savings, right? That at least you're putting away. So all these people will probably face issues 20 years, 30 years down the road, if they're not very careful. And yeah, we have a lot of disruptive, technologies, a lot of changes, AI, everything coming in. The focus is going to be on continuous learning, reskilling, lifelong development. You're not going to be taking one job and staying at that job and that role forever. Chances are you're probably going to be shifting lines of service and business at least 3 times in your career. And it'll be quite different shifts going forward. So that's something that we all have to be aware of, that you will need to probably reskill yourself at least 3 times in your career. So as I mentioned, this is why also a lot of people, a lot of employers nowadays are not looking at just the qualifications that you have. They're looking for that learning mindset and how adaptive and versatile you are as a person. Okay. Yeah, the last two I think is more about how they feel in the company. So when candidates come in as well now, they tend to look a little bit more at the company culture and values. They will look at how leadership communicates and passes the vision on to them. So you will have, people wanting to be part of town hall events, being able to ask questions during sessions. It's no longer the case where, the CEO gives a speech and everybody says clap and then they go off, right? Now they expect like, oh, we want to have like a Slido Q&A, right? Where you can ask questions anonymously or with your name, and you have to be ready to answer those questions, right? And they will pose difficult questions, and they will also assess how transparent and how clear you are with them on what is actually happening in the company. And that's more and more in demand nowadays, right? Also, yes, they're quite big on diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of the workplace culture and hiring. In terms of company branding and visibility, when deciding whether to join a company or not, you will find that candidates will check out the company profile, the branding, their social footprint. What do people say on their Facebook page, on their social page? Are there reviews on Glassdoor? Right? What do people say? Is it bad paymaster? Do people complain about the bosses there, the leadership there, all these sort of things? They will check those things, and it's important, just as important, not to have anything negative. It's important to have something for them to see as well. So being completely lacking in the digital space when they search is also like a worrying trend, right? So they will also check, their networks and connections. They will go and see sites like LinkedIn. Who do we have in common? Who has worked there? Things like that. If they have anything in common, they will make those decisions based on that as well, right? So it is important for you to be visible online. Okay. Any questions on the candidate side? Any trends that you guys have seen that was interesting or intriguing to you all that you want to know more? Yeah. Question over here.
Is it common now they sign instead of employment contract for service?
It's increasingly more common. So some of people will also be employed as individuals and freelance as well, and they will take it as gigs in that way. But yeah, it's both are fine. Do you come from a HR background? No, okay. Any other questions? Okay, then we move on to the hirer side. So as a hirer, employer, if you own your own business, what are the things that you can do? So nowadays, more and more companies are offering greater flex to their employees, right? So in some way or the other, giving employees more flexibility at work. Flexible working arrangements, working from out of the office, remote or hybrid is common, especially among the startups. So instead of competing monetarily with candidates, if like we said, entry level is like 2,000 versus like a GLC which is 3,000, 3,005. But so say if I got an offer from Petronas or I got an offer from, let's say, Grab, okay? Although Grab does pay good, let's just use that as an example of like a well-known startup, but in a startup space. They might offer you 2,005, but they will offer you 2 days in the office, 3 days from home. They will let you do, all these sort of things. There's a flex Friday or casual Friday. You can come in or not come in. We'll have socials. We'll do all these sort of things. And more often than not, you will find that candidates nowadays will pick flexible working arrangements over monetary value. They think they will get those things later on, and they will take these. They have different priorities. They want to do things in their free time. They might even be doing other gigs and things like that. So you will find like actually nowadays a lot of coders have 2 jobs. One is their actual employer and the other one is doing like gigs online. So when you're working from home, you can kind of do these things and juggle. It's terrible, but but it pays the bills, right? But you do find there's a bit of a reversing trend among the bigger corporates. So all the startups and everything are moving towards, 1 day in the office, 3 days from home, not having a physical workspace. They rent a co-working space for a weekly, stand up and catch up session, and then you're like, in 2 hours, we all meet up, we go and have lunch together, and then after that you go and work from home for the rest of the week. We catch up, we plan what are the targets for this week, and then we go. And I don't pay monthly rental, I don't have an office, I just rent a conference room and co-working space. We meet up there once a week, and then they spend that rental money on taking them out for lunch and things like that, and people feel like that is engagement and that is like productive, So, but you find the bigger players like banks and all that saying, let's move back to 5 days in the office, right? So companies which went from fully remote during pandemic, coming back, and then we had the whole phasing of like, only 50% of your employees can be in the office, all these like regulations and everything, and then they said, oh, okay, yeah, actually this works, and we're going to downsize our offices, and everyone just come in 50% and you hot desk and things like that. Slowly, those guys are moving back towards 5 days in the office, and you're even finding this in like big US firms, tech firms, Google, Facebook, Twitter, now X, saying things like come back or else, So it's quite interesting that, and there'll be this tussle, but I do believe that hybrid is probably the way going forward. Even if it's, 1 day from home or 2 days from home, right? I think that's probably the nice mix, in my personal opinion. In terms of automation and AI, you have tools coming up every day, like a tool for everything. Maybe too much. There might be some way of like, maybe in the future we'll have like super apps when it comes to AI, which combine all these things together and bring them under one roof. But there are a lot of tools that you can use to help you in your daily work now, and if you can master some of those tools, those are like great big opportunities for you to find a new business, find a new opportunity, really simplify your job, right? So yeah, you have the usual chat GPTs, you have CapCut for video, image, Canva. Copilot is learning things in your Microsoft Office and things like that. So it'll integrate across all the various Microsoft Office suite of products and help you to do your work a lot more productively. So actually, like, you can cut down the amount of time spent to create this deck from like 1 day to 1 hour or half an hour, right? If you combine, say, like OpenAI, and I search, what are the top 10 trends in this thing, and I also combine it with a PowerPoint AI presenter, and just paste that all in, it'll create a deck for me in 2 minutes, right? But then after that, you have to refine it. So I did not do that for today. Just FYI, I did it the old-fashioned way. I got a little bit at the end, which I'll show you guys. So yes, and then digital transformation is just going to continue. More and more things are going to be moving online. So even things like your government initiatives like e-invoicing and things like that are going to push more and more things towards cashless, towards digital. Okay. The other thing is, I think if you were in the last decade, any sort of big firm is talking about CSR, right? So when you're doing your annual reports, there's one section on CSR, your corporate social responsibility. So that was the big buzzword. Khazanah came up with like the silver book, which has guidelines, what you should be doing under your CSR, and all these things. But now that is moving from just CSR to what is called ESG. So now the big buzzword is ESG, which is for environment, social, and governance, right? So CSR is just one part in there, which is the social part, right? But we also look at how you're being a good corporate citizen, right? In terms of how you contribute to the environment,